John Whatley here with Stein Whatley Astorino, Louisville's personal injury law firm. I've got my partner Rob Astorino here with me today. We're going to be talking about how do I preserve evidence after a big truck wreck without spending money. Okay, we're going to go through some of the items there, some of the things you need to keep in mind if it's for you or for a family member that might be involved in a big truck wreck. Rob, can you, I think probably the primary thing after a wreck would be to take pictures if you're able to.
Yeah, I was going to say, as long as you're able to, and it's safe for you to do so, the more pictures you can take of the accident, any bruising that you have, things like that, can help down the road. Everybody's got a cell phone in your pocket these days. Obviously you shouldn't be using that while you're driving, but if you do get into a wreck with a big truck, you can take a picture of the scene, you can take a picture of the damage on the vehicles, and again, that's something you should do if you're medically able to do it, but if you're not, generally there will be a police investigation afterwards that's going to have some pictures as well that you can then go to the proper police agency, get their pictures. If you're hurt very badly and it's a serious wreck, they'll probably do that.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Mm-hmm. Primarily, if you're able to take pictures for yourself, or say if your spouse calls you to see if he or she was in a wreck, and you have the ability to do that, one of the things to keep in mind, the problem that I find with most clients is that they take pictures that are really tight of damage that's on their car. And while we're interested in damage in your car, one of the things that's really important to grab is the location of vehicles at the scene and their proximity to one another and other objects at the scene. So if you can, try to get wide pictures that show all the vehicles, where they're located in their final position. That's very helpful later on if we ever have to employ a accident construction expert, reconstruction expert, because they will rely on some of these photographs for coming up with some of their opinions. The other thing that I think that is important, and this is, you want to do this early at the scene, and don't rely on police. I mean, hopefully that they're going to grab all this information too when they take photographs like Rob had said, but skid marks. That is something that likely within days will be gone with just rain and normal wear on the road. It's very important if we know that we can judge the distance of skid marks, where they're located. Sometimes you can determine where a car started before leaving, if they were leaving their lane, that sort of thing. Damage to guardrails, light poles, if there's any sort of paint that's been transferred on a median. A lot of those things can give some indications later on when we're trying to piece together how this wreck occurred. So if you see any of those types of things, that's a great opportunity to go ahead and take pictures of those items if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything John just said. We often don't get calls immediately after wrecks happen, but when we do, John's exactly right. These are the kinds of things that we're looking for. If we're able to go visit the scene a day or two later, often the cars aren't even there anymore, but there's still a lot of valuable information, pictures of the roadway itself, just to get kind of an idea of what the spacing is, any marks on the roadway, damage to physical objects around the roadway. All those things could be valuable down the road. And another thing to consider is that even though, we don't get to the scene within a day or two, oftentimes trucking companies and their insurance companies have teams of people that are rapid response teams that go to the scene, take these pictures before the evidence is lost, and that is something that they will fight you tooth and nail trying to give you, especially if it's only helpful to them. But there are certain procedures that if the evidence is gone and they're the only ones that have a record of it, you could potentially get it in a legal case.
Yeah, and all great information. Some of the other things that can be helpful with pictures is, and I'll bring these up with two examples. Hold on a second. That's exactly right. And I'm going to bring up two examples of how pictures have helped out in cases. One was where I had a client that was injured badly in a wreck on I-65 heading south by another car. The other driver was intoxicated on, I believe, alcohol and several narcotics. But when he opened up the door and tried to flee, the little shooter ounce alcohol bottles had scattered on the floor, on the ground, and there was a bag of literally needles from injection drugs that this guy had taken.
It's incredible.
Right, and you can describe this stuff to a jury that maybe you saw these things on the floor or on the ground or on the roadway. But it's really powerful if a jury sees these pictures where they actually laid. You know, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. And it can help us, not even at a jury level, but way earlier in the claim, if we send a picture to the adjuster that's representing that particular driver and show them these pictures, it's going to change the path and direction of your claim early on. That can be very beneficial and help us get momentum for full value in your claim.
Yeah, and an additional thing out there is, now this is something that's even changed since I've been in practice about 10, 15 years ago, is the availability of video. You can actually, in addition to pictures of the scene, you can kind of take a video of where everything is, kind of how it's looking, and of course, if you're seriously injured, you need to be concerned about your medical treatment and not doing this. But in addition to the video that you can take, the police oftentimes who respond to big truck wrecks now will have body camera footage, and they're instructed that when they're talking to people after a wreck, when they're examining the scene, to have that body camera on. Mm-hmm. We have had cases before where we've requested that body camera, and it can change things. People, it's funny, people are often very honest to the police at the scene minutes after they appear, before they really have time to gather their thoughts, and even 30 minutes after the initial police encounter, after they maybe have talked to their dispatcher or their boss or even their insurance carrier, where they're getting information of, hey, make sure you don't admit it's their fault. Well, if they're on body camera, stepping out of that truck saying, oh my God, I didn't see him, they can't take that back.
The story starts changing. Right.
Very quickly. The story starts changing a lot of times. Yeah.
One of the other things that we've had in a big truck wreck, and I talked to one of the accident reconstruction experts here in the state of Kentucky, told me a story about a rear end wreck where the semi had hit and plowed in. I think it may have been a fatality. We didn't actually have this case. He was just telling me in small talk. But they had pictures of the inside of the cab, and this particular individual had multiple screens on, several phones, I think an iPad with like a TV show going. He's having a conversation with somebody. But one of the things he brought up, in addition to not having your attention on the road, he was saying this wreck happened at night, and because of all the light in the cab from all these screens he had on his dashboard, that he thought it was unlikely he could see very little outside of the cab because of how dark it was outside and the light in the vehicle. So if you were able to take pictures and you can see stuff stuck to the dashboard or the windshield, those are things that might be of help to your claim later on down the road when we are interviewing or deposing the driver. The other thing, I've had a wreck where this was it was a box truck and did not see my woman, and one of the things that was very helpful in this case was how he had all this trash on his front dashboard, like his daily calendar, empty soft drink cup.
Yeah, I mean, how you gonna see over your dashboard on that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It was just an entire mess of stuff on his dashboard, and that stuff oftentimes later on, if we get access to a truck in some sort of junkyard or whatever, all the personal items oftentimes have been cleaned out or cleared out, and you do not necessarily get the what the cab looked like at the time of the wreck. And some of those things can be very helpful if you can get a picture of that. I'm not expecting everybody to be able to do that, but if you notice something that's out of the ordinary that seems suspicious, take a picture.
Yeah, certainly, some of those things you can see from, you don't have to necessarily climb up into the cab to see, right. But take a look around at the other car. A lot of people are focused on their vehicle after a wreck, making sure that their damage is documented for insurance purposes, but don't overlook that other vehicle. There could be lots of things that help prove it, and you would be shocked at the denial of liability that some of these guys make, on rear end wrecks where they plow into people, say that the car cut them off, things like that. Trucks often, but not always, have dash cams that record the road.
Especially the newer ones. Right.
Yeah, those are getting more common in personal vehicles too, but almost all large trucks and commercial vehicles have dash cams now. And so if the police are unable to find a dash cam, or you ask for one later as part of the insurance claim and they claim there isn't one there, be very suspicious of that, because we've seen trucks where there were dash cam mounts and we go to inspect them after these wrecks and the dash cam's not there, and we have to press people to say, hey, what happened to that? And then we find out it's either been destroyed or concealed in some way, and sometimes we're able to get that back.
Right. One other thing I think that my clients generally make a mistake, and it's not fatal or anything like that, but they're always interested in their property damage to their car. So whenever I say, hey, do you have any pictures of the property damage, I get 20 pictures of their vehicle, and I say, well, did you get pictures of the other vehicle? And they say, oh, no, I did not. So while I find it helpful that I get pictures of your vehicle, what I really would like is pictures of the other vehicle, because oftentimes I don't have immediate access to that like I do your vehicle, and so we'd like to try to preserve that as best we can.
Yeah, if you take anything away from this video, pictures of the other vehicle and pictures of the scene are just as valuable as pictures of your vehicle if you're trying to make a recovery after you get hurt. And it's stuff that people just don't think about the moment. Right. Things they overlook because they're concerned about their own vehicle and their own health, and that's normal, and they should be. But those additional pictures, they don't cost you anything. You've got them on your own phone. Certainly, if it's a serious enough wreck, we will have the ability to go back and probably get some pictures that other people took of it. But it's always good to have more is better.
Okay. So we've talked about proper damage, the scene. The next thing that we need to talk about as far as pictures are concerned are your injuries. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I recommend, if you have the opportunity, you're able to do it, or if you're doing this for your spouse or your child or whoever, if you're coming to the scene, take pictures of the injuries at the scene. Again, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Oftentimes, if they're bloodied and they have bloody nose and all these sort of things, later on that stuff gets cleaned up, through treatment with an EMS or at the ER, and then it gets bandaged, and you don't necessarily see how dramatic that injury was. And that can be very traumatic for people in accidents, and it's hard to describe that later on to an adjuster or a jury.
Sure, and again, the primary thing after a wreck is your personal safety. If you've got a compound fracture, you need to take care of that instead of taking a picture of it.
Right.
People be able to understand that you're hurt very badly. But yeah, John's right. If you have scrapes, cuts, bruising that's visible immediately after the wreck, take a picture of it at the scene. Take a picture as it changes over time. Sometimes bruising gets better, sometimes gets worse before it gets better. But yeah, certainly with cuts, things like that, they often get cleaned up pretty quick. So, once you have secured your medical care, made sure that you're not under any life-threatening injuries, that kind of thing, if you have the presence of mind, document those injuries. And again, more is always better. Picture we can always decide that there are too many pictures, but if there's not enough, if there's one that's missing, you can never go back and take it again.
Right. I always tell clients it's better to have it, not need it, than need it and not have it. So if you're questioning whether you should take a picture or not, go ahead and take the picture.
And again, videos, if you got a loved one who's outside of a car, you think they may have a concussion or something, they're staggering around, take a video of what they're doing, acting in the moment. They're not hamming it up. They're not acting in the moment. They're just being themselves. You can also, if you have suspicious behavior of the other driver, you can take a video of how they're acting. We've seen some of our clients come to us and say, I could swear the other driver is intoxicated. And you'd be surprised at how many times that these big truck guys, they dodge, drug and alcohol tests after wrecks, or the police just don't do a good job investigating a potential DUI claim. If the truck driver is staggering around looking like he's drunk after the wreck, take a video of him. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's not. You mentioned it earlier in passing, sort of. In these big truck wrecks, we see catastrophic injuries for our clients. And if you or somebody or a loved one was involved in a truck wreck where you had a catastrophic injury and they've had surgery to fix a broken arm or whatever, one of the things that's very important, and it costs nothing to do, is take pictures of the treatment periodically through your recovery. Because oftentimes it's difficult for a juror sitting in a chair, or even an adjuster that's listening to us describe your claim, understand what you went through during that time period. So if you had to have some sort of surgery where they put a plate in your arm or your leg and it was invasive surgery, you got a big scar, you've got healing, you got stitches, you have to get the stitches taken out. Document the stitches, document after they've taken out, document the bruising, because oftentimes when those types of stuff, the bruising starts up in the upper extremity and moves down to the foot. And sometimes that bruising lasts for months. I've seen it last for months, and it's incredible. It's hard to describe that in words, but if you have the pictures, it's so much easier for people to understand that. That would also include when you have to come back in for wound care, because sometimes infections occur after these types of things, and the wound care is as bad or worse than the surgery itself. Take pictures of that. It's really important. It can be very helpful for your claim.
Yeah, these are often the most serious injuries that people ever encounter. More than playing sports or just getting banged up around the house. And sometimes it really is just hard for people to relate how bad it is, especially because medicine's come such a long way that a lot of times they can actually clean you up pretty good on the outside, or the injury will be at a sensitive spot in your body that you cover up with clothing, things like that. And if you walk into a jury or, you walk into a medical examination, people are looking at you saying, it doesn't look that bad.
Right.
But underneath, you're in a lot of pain. It's really changed your life. So, the more that we can have to document that, the more of a help it will be for your case in the long run.
Okay. Those are all good points, Rob. I want to shift this slightly over now that we've kind of discussed all the types of pictures, what we're looking for, how you can help yourself out with no cost there. The other way that I see that people can help themselves out is getting witness information at the scene. That is the name, phone number, email if you can. With a cell phone, oftentimes you can just go ahead and swap information right there at the scene really easily and quickly. I find that a lot of clients rely too heavily on the police. They assume, the police talk to them, that the police is going to get their information. Let me tell you, the police are overworked, understaffed, and they try to do a best job, but they do a poor job on actually getting the identification of witnesses in most cases. You'll see in the narrative that I spoke to 2 witnesses that confirmed this narrative, how the accident happened, and then you go to the section that has the witness identification, there's nobody there. And so it's really difficult for us, or impossible in some cases, to even find out who those people were.
We had a very large bus wreck case several years ago that turned on a witness statement. Both parties claimed they had the green light. Our client was ultimately correct about that. but there was a witness who actually, he witnessed the wreck, and he was a very nice man and wanted to help our client out because he thought that the bus driver was not being honest about what happened. But he was in such a hurry that he couldn't stay for the police, and had our client not gotten his contact information, we probably wouldn't have been able to win that case. So that was something that turned on that single witness information, and that was something that the police could not have even gotten because the witness didn't stick around. So yeah, don't rely on the police. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the police are not witnesses to the wreck itself. You know, they're not there. They didn't see what happened. They get there quickly and they see the aftermath, and they can talk about where all the pieces lay and where the cars are and who they talked to and all that. But they can't actually say what happened because they didn't see it. And so the only people who can are the people involved in the wreck, and anyone who's nice enough to stop or offer assistance. You know, those people are often crucial if, you know, a truck driver says, hey, it wasn't my fault, when it really is.
Right. And witnesses can also be witness to admissions by parties. So if a driver said initially, oh, I was speeding or I was doing whatever, but later changed his story, and we don't have any video of that, but a witness oftentimes will remember, oh yeah, I remember when he or she said that. I can confirm that that's the case.
It's kind of like what we were talking with the body camera earlier, but yeah, that's what happened in the bus wreck. Is the bus driver tried to say, oh, I had the green light, and the witness, you know, he was like, no, you didn't, because I was in the other lane and we had the green light. And he was like, that made me really mad, so I knew I had to, you know, be there for this guy to,
right,
because the bus driver was going to lie about it.
And by the way, if you're a viewer that is a witness to one of these types of accidents, I want to go ahead and thank you for taking the opportunity to help these people out, because oftentimes these cases are really important, and they hinge on whether or not you take the few minutes out of your day to give them your information. So I encourage, if you're a witness to an accident, try to do that. It's very helpful.
Yeah, you could change somebody's life.
Right. So we've talked about a number of things that you can do at the scene or shortly thereafter about getting evidence without having to spend a nickel. One of the other ways is hiring a lawyer, which in our case, you don't have to spend anything up front. But one of the things we do for you, and you can do this on your own, but open records requests.
Yeah.
And can you talk about what an open records request is?
So open records requests, you know, does come with some cost sometime, and I know this video is about, you know, doing things that don't cost you anything, but open records requests sometimes come with a small fee for processing from the government agency. But those are things that could include the police file, 911 tapes, fire and EMS records. And in the case of big truck wrecks, the federal government mandates a database of trucking safety logs. So these wrecks are sometimes investigated by the federal government if they're serious enough, and certainly these trucking companies are required to have, you know, more compliance things than just you or I. Their drivers are required to keep logs of everywhere they drive to make sure they're not driving too much and get tired. They're required to keep training files on their drivers. They're required to have certain licenses, undergo drug and alcohol testing. The companies themselves keep maintenance records.
Right.
All of these things are compiled in a federal government database called SAFER that you can send a Freedom of Information request to the federal government and get. Again, those things, you know, sometimes come with a small fee. Any reputable attorney, certainly our office, will pay for those fees up front for you, so it won't cost you anything out of pocket. Right. So if you do need evidence that does start to incur money, you know, a way that you can get it covered without being out of pocket is to hire a reputable personal injury attorney, a reputable attorney who knows how to do truck wrecks and knows where all this stuff is.
Right. You mentioned it or kind of alluded to it earlier, but I think this is, in my opinion, the elephant in the room with big truck wrecks. It's the electronic control module. And can you explain, one, what it is, why it's important, and what we do for our clients to get that?
So I think I said earlier, we were talking about dash cams, and that's video, that's recorded out the window. Almost every big truck has that these days. But what they are required to have is they're required to have a computer module hooked up to the engine of the truck that measures speed, direction, braking, and a lot of times they'll be tied into the truck's GPS. You can see exactly where it is on the highway.
Acceleration, percentages, deceleration.
Oh, yeah, there's just all kinds of information about how fast they're going, how hard they're stopping, if there's an impact, when that impact occurred. And in some cases, your own vehicle has this too. If you have a newer model car, you'll have a computer with a lot of this information. Some of them are more advanced than others. There's some that can determine steering angle. So if somebody makes an evasive maneuver, it'll record all that. Of course, this is where things start to not be free anymore. Downloading the evidence off of these is something that you need to hire a third-party accident reconstruction expert for. Those guys can run into several thousands to even tens of thousands of dollars. And again, the only way to not be out of pocket for you is to hire an attorney that's willing to front those costs for you. Our office certainly is.
Yes, we do that. And just jump in real quick. It's vitally important that you contact an attorney or our office as soon as you can after a wreck, because this information is perishable, and most places will hold on to that, reputable carriers, but not all, especially if it's a small town or small time trucking companies. We want to get somebody out there as soon as possible, within, I would say, 14 days, if possible, from the day of the wreck, to pull that information off of the electronic control module. Again, like Rob said, we front the cost, so it's not anything out of your pocket on the front end. We'll front those costs for you in order to, because we find it's that important for these cases.
Yeah, and even sooner, if possible, within a day or two, if our office gets information about a trucking case, that someone wants to hire us on, we send letters out to the company telling them not to destroy any of this evidence. Most trucking companies will not intentionally destroy evidence. Some will. Most will not, but they will kind of put you on a clock and say, tick-tock, your time's running out. We need to get this truck back on the road. If you don't ask us to save the evidence, it may go away. And that's not necessarily illegal or underhanded. It's just kind of a fact of life that there is a limited amount of time to get this evidence sometimes. And in the case where, the small cases where it is intentionally destroyed, in order to have an argument in court that would be helpful to your case, you need to take some action to let them know, hey, don't destroy this evidence. We expect it to be there, those kind of things. Yeah. And those letters, they're 4 or 5 page letters. They're fairly complicated.
Yeah. So you want to make sure you have a lawyer that sends that out early, the spoliation letters. And what's the benefit of having that letter out?
Well,
sending that letter, I should say.
Yeah, sending. It's called a spoliation letter, but in basic terms, it's just a letter telling them not to destroy or lose any evidence. And 95% of the time, if you get that letter out quickly, that means the evidence will be there. And if it's helpful to your case, it's something we can look at. We can help you build your case. Like I said earlier, even when trucks rear-end you, there's always a defense. They always try to blame it on you, more so than small vehicle wrecks. In big truck wrecks, it happens. And so 90 to 95% of that time, that evidence is going to be there and it's going to be helpful to you. In the 5 to 10% of the time where that evidence is destroyed after you send a letter, you can take that to court, and ultimately in your legal case later, if it comes to that, there are procedures where the court can instruct a jury to assume that the evidence was damaging to the other side, because otherwise, why would they have destroyed it?
Right.
I mean, it makes sense to you and me, but without that letter, that claim gets much, much more difficult to make. Right. It's just one of the little things that we think of because we do this all the time that people aren't aware of.
Yeah. So if you've been in a large truck accident, it's really important to make sure that you have a truck accident lawyer in Kentucky or Indiana handling that case, because there are a lot of personal injury lawyers, small town personal injury lawyers that may not have a lot of experience with truck accidents and not really protect your rights the way we would, or some of the other trucking lawyers around the state that do this all the time.
We've gotten cases secondhand where, you know, these evidence letters have not been sent out, the electronic control module has not been downloaded, the dash cam's gone, and the police didn't necessarily do the most thorough investigation. So you look at the case and you say, my client got rear-ended. All of a sudden the trucking company is making a big defense, and we're saying, well, where's all this helpful information? And it's gone. Right. And you know, sometimes we get those even after other attorneys have been in the case, and it's nothing against them. It's just this is not stuff that everybody knows. This is not, truck wreck cases are not as easy as people think they are. They're not as straightforward as just saying, I got rear-ended by a truck. That's the end of it. You got to get into these government databases. You got to hire an accident reconstruction. You got to get all the computerized information. If you don't know where that is, it can be a big problem. If you hire a good truck wreck personal injury attorney early in the case, you can get all this evidence, no out-of-pocket cost to you, and it can really, you know, change the value of your case.
Well, yeah, that's a really important. The other thing and how this can help you in your case later on is adjusters know if the attorney that's handling this claim, it knows what they're doing, especially early on. If they've gone out and they've got an expert that's gone out and got the information off the electronic control module, there are spoliation letters that have been mailed out that they've received either for themselves to hang on to that. Those can be indicators that all of a sudden I've got to treat this claim differently than I'm going to treat it with somebody that's handling it themselves, or even an attorney that doesn't do car wrecks. That helps us get value for your claim, the full and fair value of your truck accident claim that you might not get if you tried to do it on your own or went to an attorney that doesn't handle these regularly.
I mean, yeah, it's common occurrence in our office that we get cases secondhand from other attorneys, or get cases where people have tried to handle them on themselves who don't have this information and, you know, haven't taken our advice, gone getting the government database and all that stuff. You know, where the offer to the previous attorney or the individual client we're able to immediately double or triple that before we even do any work, just because they know who we are. And I mean, that doesn't happen in every case. And a lot of times we don't even take that initial double or triple offer, because then we get to work, we get all the evidence that's still out there. And I mean, we're really able to maximize value of these for people who are going through a lot and who really need this money to help their recovery.
Right. Well, thanks for that information, Rob. Do you have any final thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, you know, the things that you can do are, you know, to maintain the scene, probably wider than you think. But again, a lot of times you're going to be seriously injured. And so in order to get in and get the evidence that you need, no out-of-pocket cost to you, really the only way to do that is to get, you know, an attorney who's experienced with truck wrecks and who's willing to take the case on contingent fee like our office is.
Yeah. Rob, thank you for all that valuable information. If you've been in a truck wreck in the state of Kentucky or Indiana and you want help in preserving evidence and prosecuting your claim against the at-fault party, give us a call. Stein Whatley Attorneys, serious attorneys, serious results. 502-553-4750. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everybody.